Okay, so I think we should start. Um, it's a beautiful Sunday evening. Hopefully, you've all had a little dinner, and we can all have a short walk when we're done. It won't be too late. But I want to. My name is Bonnie Chodas. I'm the president of ADATH Sisterhood, and I'm the executive of the synagogue recently. And I want to welcome you to our very interesting series, Everyone Has a Story. And we've brought many very interesting people from our community, from our synagogue and around our area to talk about different things that they've done in their lives, things that they think about, things that are important to them, and things that we hope are of interest to you all. Some of you may know Jon socially, through school, through Myra's kids. I happen to have met Jon for the first time when I was teaching his son at Solomon Schechter, and he was the president of Solomon Schechter Academy. So that was our first meeting, and I'm sure we had seen each other socially through some common friends over the years, and then in one of my first times that I hosted Everyone Had a Story for ADATH, I had I brought Linda Weinberg-Fishman to talk about her experiences in her book, Repairing Rainbows. And unbeknownst to me, Linda and Jon they had a joined backyards since they were 1 year old. They were best friends. And if you've read her book or have been present at her lecture that evening, you'll understand why that bond is so strong and how they've supported each other through many years. I don't want to go on too long. It's Jon's story, and I'm going to hand the mic over to you, and I'll let Jon begin.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to extend a very special thank you to Bonnie Chodas and the ADATH Sisterhood for the invitation to speak this evening. It truly is an honor to have been invited, and I'm very humbled to have been asked to tell my story. I don't often tell my story, however, in forums like this, as it's deeply personal, but there's a very strong message that comes from the story, that one can take the lessons of grief and turn it into the power to heal. Sherry Mandel, whose 13-year-old son, Kobe Mandel, was murdered by terrorists in Israel in 2001, refers to this as the blessing of a broken heart. She says that the way to make a broken heart whole is by doing because of what you know, because of what you have experienced. I know that this rings perfectly true for me. Why? Because no one should have the worst day of their life at the age of 3 years old. But that's what happened to me. My story is a very sad one. Unfortunately, it is not unique to me. For every day another child becomes a part of the unfortunate and life-altering club of having lost a parent or a sibling at a young age. My dear mother, Myra, died tragically from a brain aneurysm 24 hours after giving birth to my brother in 1960. My mother was 30, I was 3. My big sister was 7. My father was left to care for 3 children and at the same time deal with the loss of his beloved wife. In those days, when a tragedy of this magnitude happened, it was common thinking that the best way to deal with the tragedy was to stay silent and carry on as if nothing ever happened. As a result of this thinking, my mother's name was never mentioned through all my years of growing up, right down to there being no pictures of my mother anywhere in our house. The impact of all of this was far-reaching. When a child is impacted by trauma, immediately they push it down so deep as they can, because they never want to feel the pain. They do everything to hide it. They try to make it invisible. In my case, because of the decision to not deal with it, the impact was that much worse. It became a taboo, and everyone played along. Everyone agreed that in order for my mother's 3 children to heal, she was never to be mentioned again. As a consequence, I completely blacked out any and all recollection of my first 3 years of existence, and of course, that meant any recollection of my mother. But I knew it was always there. I knew I was different. It was always there when I was alone with my thoughts, and because I never knew what happened, there was also a tremendous sense of guilt. Maybe she left because of me. I would also never let anyone get too close. I know now that I was always fearful that closeness could result in pain, the pain of opening a very deep and hidden wound. I never liked to be far from home. I also had a hard time saying goodbye, again, not realizing that goodbyes were hard for me because my mom never returned. Through all of the early years, my sister and I both respected the decision to not speak about my mother. Why? It was simple. Out of tremendous love and respect for my father, we never wanted to reopen his wound. It's a natural reaction of children that suffer this type of trauma. They want to protect the surviving parent, and I know that my father's whole objective was to shield his children from both his and their own pain. It was only as I grew older that I realized how important it was to allow all of this to come out. And eventually it did, very slowly, with the first breakthrough coming when I was 12 years old. I was at summer camp, and it came out that my mother had died. Someone asked me when she died and how she died. I was stumped. I thought about it a little more and said that she had died when I was 3 in 1960. That led to some further pondering, and I realized for the first time that my mother died in 1960, my brother was born in 1960, so there had to be some sort of connection between the two. Imagine 9 years after the fact, and this was a revelation to me. The next major breakthrough came when I found myself at my mother's grave for the first time when I was 23 years old, 20 years after my mother's passing, and it has been a steady evolution ever since. My daughter recently said to me that if anyone looked at me, no one would ever know that I had suffered such a life-altering tragedy. That's the ironic thing. On one hand, we don't want anyone to know. We want to be strong and keep it hidden. But in so many ways, we want everyone to know. We want everyone to know how much it hurts. We want to be strong for our surviving parent, and we also want to be strong for our parent that is no longer here. Yet at the same time, we want to shout it out in pain. We want to express our sadness. How often through the years, I wish that I could wear a little something that said, "Handle with care," a special instructional sign saying, "Please be gentle. I'm a boy who lost his mother at the age of 3. So what is the lesson to be learned? My trauma was compounded. It was worsened by the lack of healing and the lack of support in the immediate years following my mother's passing. I've come through it, but it's taken me over 60 years, whereas it could have been a lot easier to deal with if it had been done at the right time. Had her memory been kept alive, my whole world would have changed. The lesson for all of us here is that we have to communicate. We have to give kids the chance to speak. We have to allow them to express their feelings. And most important, we have to be there for them. The ability to deal with the trauma head on will allow a child to put the past in a place that allows them to carry on with their lives. And very importantly, it's not only that I was never given a chance to properly grieve, it's also that I was never given the chance to properly celebrate my mother's life with stories and with pictures. As I said, I've always wanted to tell my story, and I've always thought that it was primarily because I wanted the whole world to understand my pain. I often thought that everyone needed to know that a very special woman left this world in 1960 and left her 3 children and grieving husband behind. I now know that I've also wanted to tell my story because I never wanted other children to feel the pain that I felt and to go on a grief journey alone. And more than tell my story, I needed to act as well. And that brings me to the next part of my story, the power to heal. There are 1.5 million grieving children in North America today, and grieving children are at a much greater risk than their peers for depression, suicide, poverty, and substance abuse. I needed to make a difference. I always knew that I wanted to provide support for children who had suffered the loss of a close family member, but I didn't know what that support would look like. I researched a number of organizations that were currently providing grief programs for kids, but they didn't seem to be the right fit for me. I wanted something more. At the urging of my lifelong friend, Linda Fishman, who has provided counseling, inspiration, and tremendous support to countless grieving families in Toronto, in May 2016, I finally decided that I would take the step towards bringing a grief camp to Montreal. There was no existing weekend grief camp in all of Quebec. I was really in uncharted territory. But I had 2 basic conditions. Whatever I did had to be free for all families, and it also had to be open to all. Now, I was a financial analyst with 0 professional experience related to grief or social work or working with children. I had no experience or credentials to run a bereavement camp. I needed someone to take the journey with me. I reached out to Corey Sirota, who is the preeminent authority on grief counseling in Montreal. Corey immediately jumped at the opportunity and became our clinical director, a position she still holds today. Our first grief camp weekend was set for August 2017. It was an ambitious plan, but we were determined to get everything in place and run the camp only 8 months after our start. That first summer, we welcomed 25 campers and have never looked back. We even found a way to operate the camp program during the 2 summers of COVID. Today, 8 years later, Myra's Kids Foundation has provided support to over 350 grieving children. Last month, we welcomed 70 children to our 3- and 4-day grief camp programs. Our camp program remains our signature program of Myra's Kids. The camp allows children to tell their story in a safe environment, connect with friends who are facing similar circumstances, build a toolbox of skills to deal with their grief, honor the memory of their special person, and very importantly, also have fun at the same time. The camp is run by seasoned camping professionals and a team of 45 volunteers, including volunteer grief counselors, volunteer nurses, volunteer doctors, and even a volunteer funeral director, as well as the volunteer bunk counselors who are all trained in trauma-informed care. In addition to our summer weekend camp, this past June, we ran our first ever family grief camp with 16 families taking part. Our families told us that they wanted a program where the whole family unit could experience our grief programs that we had become known for over the camp weekend. We listened, developed the program, and it was a huge success. Throughout the year, Myra's Kids runs monthly support programs which attract up to 30 children at a time. We also run holiday and special events programming to provide grieving families a place to share the harder holidays like Mother's Day and Father's Day. We have distributed over 600 of our grief journals, and we are bringing children's grief awareness education to schools across Montreal based on a partnership that we have built with the English Montreal School Board. Our goals are simple, and they really haven't changed from day one: to help normalize the grief process for children, to help children learn to cope with their grief, and to provide a safe place and space where children can grieve with other children who have experienced a loss. Why does what we do work? It's based on one simple concept: connectivity. We connect children and their families to each other. We bring them together, and the connection is instant and so powerful. I've truly never seen such a powerful people connector, such as grief. I am so proud of how far we've come in such a short period of time. What makes me even prouder, in addition to the intended impact that we are having on the lives of so many grieving children, is the unintended and incredibly positive consequences that have arisen since starting Myra's Kids. Offering our programs at no cost to the families has opened up grief support to some families who would never be able to afford these types of support services and counseling. It's also been wonderful to see the unity amongst diverse communities, people who would never be exposed to other communities coming together to share their grief. Intergenerational support between the children has also become a consequence that I really never envisioned. Seeing older kids wanting to help the younger kids with their grief. So much so that we now have 5 of our original campers that started with us in year 1 or 2, who are now volunteers at the camp and giving back to the children the same as they had when they were kids. While we offer our services to kids, the families have benefited tremendously as well, with connections being made within our caregiver community. Widows getting support and connecting with other widows. Families who have suffered the loss of a child connecting with other families. Families who have been with us for a number of years, helping families who have just gone through a loss. Everyone wants to be a part of the healing process. It truly is a beautiful thing to witness. Another unintended consequence, and one that I'm particularly proud of, is sparking the grief journey of the 14 to 18-year-old age group. Our programs have hit a very strong note with teens, which is highly unusual and very unexpected. These teens are even seeing each other outside of our programs, outside of the camp, and have built true, long-lasting friendships, again, based on their grief connection. Lastly, the most important part of dealing and coping with grief is your support network, which, if you're lucky, begins with those closest to you. I have been blessed with an incredible wife and my children, Mikey, Stu, Sarah, Jessica, and Bradley. They, along with my 3 granddaughters, have provided me with strength, inspiration, and love, which in turn has allowed me to pursue my dream of building Myra's kids. And remember, they are all Myra's kids. They are Myra's grandchildren and great-grandchildren who are working tirelessly in her name to help others. And that is the biggest unintended consequence that I never could have imagined. Every one of my family members has implicated themselves in Myra's kids and have been crucial to the success of the organization. That's the biggest blessing of what Myra's kids has brought to me. So what's the lesson in this? One doesn't have to build their own Myra's kids. You can start off with any idea, small or big, that honors your loved one. Simply doing anything in the name of your loved one to help others allows each of us the power to heal. To honor your special person, to do something in the name of your loved one, is an incredible way to heal. The power to take something tragic and turn it into something good for others. The power to harness your pain, the grief that encircles you, and do something for others, all in the name of your loved one. Anything that provides you comfort through your grief journey is a worthwhile endeavor. The grief will never go away. There will always be something missing. It's what you do with that grief that allows you to move forward and carry on. As I mentioned at the beginning, a big part of my healing process has been the actions I've taken with the founding of Myra's Kids. Remember Sherry Mandel's blessing of a broken heart. I am taking my tragedy and turning it into the power to heal, the power to offer grieving children the support that they need to move forward. That's the blessing of my broken heart. I know that my grief journey will never end, but Myra's Kids is the continuation of my grief journey, and it is the most enlightening, fulfilling, and empowering phase of my journey to date. November is Children's Grief Awareness Month across North America. Up until 2 years ago, the month was never marked by any organization or on awareness in Montreal or the province of Quebec. Myra's Kids has now led the way and has not only brought Children's Grief Awareness Month to the community, but has also spearheaded the declaration of the month in the Quebec National Assembly, as well as the lighting up of the Ferris wheel in the Old Port in the color blue, the internationally recognized color symbolizing children's grief. With all that we have accomplished, there's still so much more to do. We really want to offer whatever a grieving family needs to move forward, and we will continue to build on the successes that we have seen. We are changing lives, but we know that there's still so many more children who could benefit from what we have to offer. Remember, 8 years ago, the services offered by Myra's Kids never existed in Montreal or anywhere else in the province. At Myra's Kids, we're making it our daily mission to ensure that no child grieves alone. I know what that feels like, and I am laser focused on ensuring that no other child has to feel that way. Thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. And now, Bonnie, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. You have to give me a moment because that's a very powerful, sorry, very powerful, very inspirational, and okay. Uh, so I have a couple of questions. One is you referred to a grief journal that you've made. Can you tell us a little bit what that's about?
So during COVID, we didn't want any of the children to miss out on the opportunity to have somehow a way to mark their grief, deal with their grief in any type of grouping. So we put together a grief journal that has all these exercises and all these opportunities to write stories about the person who died, to really keep a diary, to keep a journal about your thoughts as they are related to the person who has died. And we've continued to republish the journal because it ends up being a very good method for children to really start their grief journey by being prompted to write certain things down anytime they think about them, so they will have this in place based on their memories of the person who died.
So you are really a pioneer in the field, right?
Well,
Your team.
we're pioneers here. Um, uh, there are tremendous grief programs that are available in the U.S. What we have done differently than any other grief program that's in the United States, or even the ones that are available in Toronto or out west, we've really turned it into a full service model. So we're not just one thing to the families. We try and be everything to the families. There's no other organization that does everything for the families the way that we do. So in that way, we're pioneers.
Right, right. So you provide more than just a 3-day grief camp. Um, once a year, you continue the services.
That's right. So, for example, at a number of camps, children are not allowed to go back to repeat on a yearly basis. We didn't believe that that was the way to run our camp. And as a result of allowing kids to come back, because remember, they don't stop grieving after 1 year of camp.
Oh.
So we have watched kids that have come to us when they're 8, 9, or 10 years old, and there's a whole different grief cycle that they're going through when they're 14, 15, and 16. And then these are the same kids that don't want to leave Myra's Kids, and they're coming back as volunteers. So that's been very unique to our weekend retreat as well. And then the fact that we operate support programs on basis, that's also something that's not done by other organizations in the same way that we do it.
So you're saying you allow kids to repeat the program, but how do they find you, and how do you have to vet? Is there any process?
So every child that wants to come to our camp is interviewed by Corey, our clinical director. They have to fill out an application, and then they're interviewed to understand if the grief camp is right for them, if they're ready for it. And you have to have children that want to be there. So that's what we're looking for. We find the kids primarily through social workers and psychologists in schools. That's been our biggest referral network, has been social workers and psychologists within the schools. We also work with a number of agencies, like, for example, OMETS, who will send us referrals as well. We get referrals from psychologists, and we have a significant number of kids that come through word of mouth. And our biggest challenge from day one is awareness. We want to open ourselves up, open the program up to as many kids as possible, but we have to be found. And so that's why we're doing as much as possible, social media, Children's Grief Awareness Month, all those things are part of making people aware of what we have to offer them.
And of course, speaking to the Sisterhood of ADATH and our everybody who's listening today. You said that you would offer to service through the English Montreal School Board.
So we have partnered with the English Montreal School Board, whereby we go into the schools during November in Children's Grief Awareness Month, and we talk to the students about children's grief. And it's something very important, but not done very often. A lot of the schools are not very comfortable about talking to their kids about grief. We found that in any of the classes that we go into and we talk to them, the children are very anxious to tell their stories about someone who has done in their life. A lot of them talking about a grandparent, a lot of them talking about a neighbor, but they want to share the story. So they know what grief is, and they welcome the opportunity to hear about children's grief and what specifically children's grief means. So we're doing that with the school. They're also, blue is the color of children's grief. And so we have a number of schools that have a Dress in Blue Day on the third Thursday in November, the same day that we light up the Ferris wheel in the Old Port, Children's Grief Awareness Day, and they raise money for Myra's kids. So they get involved as well. So the English Montreal School Board has been wonderful and a great partner, realizing the importance of children's grief awareness.
I mean, it just seems so counterintuitive when you talked about how they took away all the photos of your mom and tried to sort of erase her memory, which has also seems so counter to the Jewish religion, where you have to, you know, yiskor, you have to remember and you have to talk, and it just seems so horrible,
But it wasn't done with any malintent. It was the way in those days that they felt would be the best way to deal with the children who were left behind. And they honestly believed that the best way to deal with it would be to take away the memory and just move forward, and we would forget everything. We know now that that's the worst thing that you can do. When we're at camp, and also during any of our programs, we encourage the children to do anything in the name of their special person. So in camp, they're making lanterns and decorating them with all the favorite things that they remember of their mom or their dad. So we have lanterns that are decorated, for example, with the Canadiens logo. And when you ask, the little boy, he said he remembered watching the games with his dad. His dad loved the Habs, and that's what he put on the lantern. So we're bringing the ability to remember anything that they can about their loved one. That's the way it needs to be done. It wasn't done properly for me.
No, first of all, I want to relay my condolences on the loss of your mom.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I realize it's never too late. And when I think of friends who have lost moms or dads in their childhood or their teens, and I'm thinking not just of Linda, of course of Linda, but there was a girl in my class that I was very close with who lost her mom. Also, she had an aneurysm, and my friend was a teenager. I mean, it wasn't spoken about, and there was no support. And I know this person has been suffering, for years.
I mean,
And
Bonnie, people tell me that they wish that this was available when they were kids, even when they were teens, because it would have changed their life. I was at my 50th high school reunion just a month ago, as I mentioned to you earlier. And when people asked what I was doing, I told them, and they said, what brought you to do something for grieving children? And I said, my mom died when I was 3 years old, and they were shocked. And these are people that I grew up with from kindergarten. It was just never mentioned. No one talked about it. And that's a tragedy.
absolutely, absolutely. So when may I ask, is your dad still alive?
No, my dad passed away 15 years ago.
I'm sorry. So he didn't see you with this turnaround
No,
at Myra's kids.
no.
I'm sure he'd be very, very proud of you.
I hope he would be. My
Yeah.
my sister's on. Uh,
Oh, would anybody, would you like to say something? Can I open the, what about Linda or Barry? If there's something you want to say to Jon or to everybody else here? No.
Linda always has a couple of words to say.
No, Linda, I'm putting her on the spot. I'm just looking, there were a few people that, wanted to thank you personally for coming and found it very, very inspiring. And
Thank you.
they're very glad that you shared your story. And I'm
Linda,
glad,
Linda
very,
went off,
very
Linda
glad.
went off mute, Bonnie.
Oh, okay, Linda.
Took me a little while to figure out how to turn off the mute, but I did it. I'm going to have to call Jon later anyways and have a very long conversation with him because I am so incredibly proud of what he has done. And I tell him all the time that the courage it took for him to do what he has done is indescribable. And he has impacted so many lives, way more lives than just the kids who have come to camp. And he's being really humble about how many people have been impacted by what he has done. And the talks that he has done where he is helping people see how important it is to talk about death and dying and grief. That even if they don't come to camp, his message is far more important and has reached far more people than he's probably even aware. So thanks for doing this, Bonnie. As I told you when I got the email, I was so happy that you were giving him yet another opportunity to share this incredible story. And we're all so proud.
And I'm so fortunate to be connected to both of you and to see how the connections just, multiply and grow. And it's you're both lovely, lovely people. And let me just say again, for those who don't know, Linda Fishman, she wrote a book called Repairing Rainbows. She's a social worker, grief counselor, and camp director for many years. And what's the name of the camp that you had run in Toronto?
Adventure Valley. But I also want to give you the kudos you deserve, Bonnie, because as soon as Bonnie heard about this, as soon as she found out about Myra's kids, she jumped in with a full commitment, not only financially, which has been so incredible, but just your devotion and commitment to Myra's kids and to this cause is just incredible, really incredible. And you did it all so quietly, and really you should be screaming and telling everybody because it's really amazing.
Well, I'm going to let Jon do the screaming about I'm going to leave my last question and then we'll ask Rabbi Whitman to just close out for the evening. So where does the funding come? Because it's free, it's wonderful, you're doing a million things, and yes, they're volunteers, but the expenses must be enormous to run it.
So we do have large expenditures, and they're growing because more and more people are finding out about what we're doing. So around when I started, everything came through individual donors. Now it's 40% from individual donors, 30% from private family foundations, and 30% from corporate donors. We don't have any government funding. We have not been built on any government funding, but we're always looking at putting together additional grants to raise more funds. And as we become more well known, hopefully we'll also be able to raise more funds as well. But I think people know after 8 years, if there is a family that needs anything, I will find the funds needed to ensure that they get everything that they need. So while funding is very important, we're just going to keep moving forward, and I'm just going to make sure that I just knock on even more doors to get the funding that's required to help these families. So many of them are just completely overwhelmed by their grief. They don't have time to do regular things. And if we can be there to support them in any way that we can, that's what we want to be able to do.
Well, it's just amazing. It's inspiring. You're, I don't know, full of energy and strength and love, and
Thank you.
such a good heart.
And Bonnie, I just wanted to mention your Solomon Schechter connection, the fact that I saw that Rosa Feinstein is on, and I saw that Susan Berkovich is on. And as you all know, my wife Ellen has only been teaching at Solomon Schechter for 44 years now. And so it's like a Solomon Schechter reunion as well.
So thank you so much for coming, Rosa and Susan and everybody. Before we say goodbye, we'd just like a few closing words from Rabbi Whitman.
Okay. First of all, Bonnie, thank you so much for arranging this incredible evening. Thanks to you and to the Sisterhood. You provide us with thought, with inspiration, with the ability to meet these wonderful, spectacular people. It's a pleasure, Jon, to welcome your family who are with us, and Linda Fishman, who impacts so many people, and we've had the pleasure, the privilege to get to know and to welcome everyone that is here tonight. Jon, I want to add, I am so sorry for your mother's passing, and I cannot imagine what that experience has been for you. At the same time, I am deeply grateful to you and inspired by how you are helping children and making a difference in their lives. I appreciate what you said, that this is so personal for you, and it must take tremendous generosity of spirit for you to open yourself in this way, to share this with you. You're bringing to life Sherry Mandel's words of the blessing of a broken heart is something that every single one of us at some point in our lives need to learn. It is the way to heal. It is the Jewish way to heal. It is just what we know now, the way to heal, by taking a tremendous pain and using that in a constructive and positive way. And alongside the help you give to so many individuals, the entire Jewish people is going through this experience as a collective. Since October 7th, the trauma that we have faced and the myriad ways that people in Israel, people here, people all over the world are emulating your approach by taking their pain and using it to build and using it to grow and to help others to grow. Jon, you are an inspiration to us. We are grateful to you. I am grateful to you for inspiring me and for helping so many people. Thank you, Jon, very, very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Jon, there was someone, Carol Gross from the Israel trip says, Kol hakavod, Jon, incredible organization and much needed sympathy on your huge loss. And I think we all echo her feelings. And,
Thank you, Bonnie.
may you go from strength to strength.